Remember, when Judicial Watch fought for successfully to get access to the warrant and to the affidavit, which was redacted, but we got a lot of information out of it. Remember, the Justice Department, the Biden Justice Department, wanted not one word to come out, but we beat them. First up, though, is the developments out of Florida in the case concerning Joe Biden's political raid on Trump's home. I mean political in the sense that it had no lawful basis in my view. As I've described to you before, the President of the United States, when he's president, has the ability to denote records as presidential records versus personal records. And that means he can also, and separately, declassify any records he wants. And the prior Justice Department position had been, and we know this for a fact because Judicial Watch was involved in the case, it was a case over tapes in Clinton's sock drawer that he kept that concerned recordings of his talking to foreign leaders and other sensitive topics that were presumably classified. And we thought maybe, hey, doesn't the PRA cover that? And the Justice Department said, nope, if he takes them with him when he's out of after the presidency, they're presumably personal. So why did they change the rules for Trump? So when you hear noise that these records are classified in government records, the Justice Department is being dishonest. They're being dishonest with the American people and, in my view, the courts. And the courts, I believe, know something's up. And indeed, Judge Cannon in Florida, who has been handling President Trump's request for a special master and other relief, seems to be suspicious of the Justice Department. And the Justice Department lost hugely earlier this week when the judge issued this ruling granting President Trump's request for a special master. Now, of course, the left is outraged that a judge, let alone a judge appointed by President Trump, made this ruling because the left doesn't believe the president has civil rights. The left doesn't believe the president should get the time of day from the courts because they hate Trump and they don't believe all the protections available to any other citizen, and particularly to any other president, should be available to President Trump. Well, the court begged to differ, and the court, I think, exposed the corruption of the Justice Department, albeit in a nice way. I've got the decision here, actually, and for instance, according to the Privilege Review Team's report, now supposedly the Justice Department had a Privilege Review Team look at documents before the investigators at the FBI were able to look at them. The seized materials from President Trump's home included medical documents, correspondence related to taxes, and accounting information. So the Justice Department is telling the court that Trump has no interest, property interest in these documents, and the court's saying, what are you talking about here? The government has also acknowledged that it sees some personal effects without evidentiary value, and by its own estimation, upwards of 500 pages of materially potentially subject to attorney-client privilege. So, and the court also explained in her ruling that the Justice Department confessed to her that some attorney-client protected material did make it through the filter team and was seen or made available to people who shouldn't have seen it. And so what the judge wants is a special master to reassure the American people that justice is being fairly administered. And she defends the court, the president, you know, that she highlights the consequences to the President Trump, if these records that they really have no right to are misused. He faces potential harm by way of improper disclosure of sensitive information to the public. Further, plaintiff is at risk of suffering injury from the government's retention and potential use of privileged materials in the courts in a process that so far has been closed off to the plaintiff and that has raised at least some concerns as to its efficacy, meaning the process that the Justice Department has instituted that has no outsider making sure they're doing the right thing vis-a-vis President Trump. So the government has made the argument, the Biden administration, that the President Trump had no interest, no possessory interest, the technical term I think is, in these documents that were either classified or government records and such. And the court said, no, 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 no here. I mean, there's an issue about what these documents are and who they belong to. So your conclusion doesn't necessarily mean that that's the end all and be all here. And of course, in none of these proceedings, as the government admitted, that there's this other court ruling in the Judicial Watch Clinton sock drawer case in which they took a completely different position with respect to presidential records, where the court, in a decision that the Justice Department and Archives wanted, said the Archives has no business demanding any records, can't second guess the president's determinations. I mean, how does that fit in with what they're doing here? And the court also found that there is potential executive privilege the president can assert here. And so there has to be a special master who can look at this. And the court enjoined the Justice Department from using any of these documents in its investigation. Now, the Justice Department's outraged at that because it means their whole sham attack and continued abuse of Trump has to stop for now, in part, at least in the way, in terms of any official investigation. And this is what the judge found at the end. The court is mindful that restraints on criminal prosecutions are disfavored, but finds that these unprecedented circumstances call for a brief pause for a neutral third-party reviewer to ensure a just process with adequate safeguards. So the judge shut it down, and both the Justice Department and President Trump and his team have to propose ideas for special masters and how they're going to operate. It should be they should be filing it any minute now. I've been half jokingly saying that Judicial Watch should be the special master. You can probably trust Judicial Watch as much as anyone to look at this material fairly. But in many ways, a special master under the Justice Department's initial theory of how presidential records are supposed to be handled really doesn't have much to do other than to make sure that all the records that they took are turned back to Trump. Because as I said, all those records are President Trump's personal records under their theory of the law and under the Presidential Records Act. So that to me is kind of where the rubber ultimately ought to meet the road, whether the president's team makes that aggressive argument or not. And I don't think it's aggressive. I think it's just asserting the facts and the laws the Justice Department has previously told the courts. I don't know whether that's going to happen or not, whether those issues are going to be joined. But there has to be a reckoning for this raid on the president's home that resulted in the retention of documents they had no right to by their own admission. And sure enough, in the filing that they've made, threatening the court, saying, you need to stay your ruling because we want to still look at these records, they tell the court that no matter basically how the court rules, they're going to appeal by September 15th. So without even having read how they handle how she handles their motion to stay, they're going to appeal, which is the height of arrogance. And similarly, the day after, by the way, the court complained about essentially the leaks and the appearance of bias in this process and how Americans need to be reassured by the appointment of a special master. The Justice Department leaks out to the Washington Post a document from the raid. So this is the arrogance. And they show contempt for the court, whether it's technically legally contempt of court, that's another matter. But this is contempt for the court, contempt for the rule of law. You see it in this filing they made where they're essentially telling the judge, we don't care how you're going to rule, how well considered it is, we're just going to appeal it, which is, in my view, inappropriate. And secondly, they admit and they confess that there are personal documents they're going to return to President Trump. So again, none of this is voluntary. Remember, when Judicial Watch fought successfully to get access to the warrant and to the affidavit, which was redacted, but we got a lot of information out of it. Remember, the Justice Department, the Biden Justice Department, wanted not one word to come out, but we beat them. And in this case, President Trump beat the Justice Department. So you've had two courts on this sensitive matter basically tell the Justice Department, we don't buy your legal arguments and we don't trust you to do right by President Trump. And of course, the media won't talk about it that way, but Judicial Watch will. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and like our video down below.